What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back for yet another episode of Under the Radar for you guys. This is a packed episode because there was a lot that came out on the 16th of September, which is what I'm going to be covering. Now, a lot of these I'm going to try and make them as quick as I possibly can, just to make room for everything else. But we're kicking things off with the debut full-length from North Dakota death metalers, Phobophilic, with Enveloping Absurdity. So this came out on Prosthetic Records, and I got into checking this one out after watching Thralls of Metal do their review for it, and I thought, you know what, this might be something up my alley, I'm gonna give it a listen. And boy, it was up my alley. Like, you get all this, like, murky cosmic atmosphere of bands like Time Ghoul and Blood Incantation, but it's more gross sounding, like it's very filthy sounding. It's raw and cavernous, kind of like Autopsy and Incantation a little bit. There's even, at times, some of the riffs I hear on this album kind of remind me of a band like Demolich, for example, but then you get some stuff that reminds me of Cannibal Corpse, like in the groove and other riffs, but this album's also very melodic, too, and technical. Like, not wankery technical, but just technical riff writing, and with, like, a cool little melodic element on top of everything. Production-wise, really solid production. Like, it sounds raw, it sounds gritty, done in modern day. And the drums, I was complaining a lot about the drums on the Behemoth album. This makes up for it. Overall, I have no complaints about this album. I give this a 9 out of 10. I will probably pick this one up eventually, but yeah, this is a great debut for a band that I hope continues to kick ass going forward. So, kudos to you, none other than Phobophilic. So now the second album I'm talking about for this week, this is a band I never heard of until now, and it's the latest studio offering from Switzerland thrash metalers, Algebra. And no, I'm not kidding. There is a band called Algebra with their album Chiroptera, or Chiroptera, whatever it is, that's the name of the album. So yeah, this is a young, upcoming thrash metal band from Switzerland, and they actually have a big member in the band, and that is Victor Brandt, formerly of Entombed AD. I believe he's currently in Witchery, Aeon, well, used to be in Aeon. He's on bass on this album. So this album is essentially their attempt at making their own brand of Bay Area thrash, but with little bits of prog here and there on some tracks. And the Bay Area thrash that they're kind of taking influence from is primarily bands like Testament and Forbidden, that little bit more that proggy, almost technical side. Though they're not as technical as their home countryman Coroner, but they do their own thing within their 80s Bay Area thrash, or 80s thrash sound. Now, I will say, like, the first half, very energetic. Like, there are some fast, thrashy tunes, even blast beats, which kind of helps give it a little bit of, like, that death metal vibe at times. The first half was very, very well done. Second half kind of trailed off for me a little bit. It's like a lot of these songs kind of sounded the same to me after a while. But the biggest issue I have with this album, I was not a fan of the song Constricted at all. That's my biggest issue with this album. The production definitely has more heart to it, for sure, to kind of make up for a bit of a stinker with Constricted. So overall, this album is solid for what it is. I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10. There's potential with this band for sure. Just a couple of tweaks they could work on, and that's trying to get a little bit more creative, and then also maybe not do as much cheesiness. And I think this band definitely can go far, especially when you got a great bass player like Victor Brandt in the band. So 8 out of 10 for Algebra, which is probably like 1625s in Algebra. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. Now, the third album we're talking about here is the latest from Boston death doom metalers. We have Innumerable Forms with Philosophical Collapse. So this, again, another band I had never heard of until now, but upon doing the research, this band features Chris Olsch from Power Trip and Mammoth Grinder, among many other projects, on guitars, and produced by Arthur Risk. So I was like, okay, this one should be really good, and well, it was more than really good. This is a fantastic album. I mean, for a Death Doom band, they kind of check mark a lot of different bands within Death Doom. You know, early Paradise Lost, some Winter, little bit of like Hooded Menace, but it also has a little bit of influence from some Finnish death metal bands like early Amorphous, Demigod, Convulse, couple of bands along those lines. It's like mashing together the best of Finnish death metal and the best of Death Doom and mash it together. Because like the first half of the album, you get a little bit more of the death metal side with Doom moments. And then the second half pretty much becomes mostly Death Doom from there on out. Like, everything, like, this album is about as heavy as Zev Bellringer's titties, and which is a good thing, mind you, it's a good thing. But I just love how murky it sounds, and the atmospherics that you get on here. Overall, this is a fantastic album. 9.5 out of 10. This is definitely a pickup for sure in the future, because this might be up there amongst the best Death Doom albums of the year. I will definitely say that right now. Check it out if you haven't. Now for the fourth album we're talking about the sophomore effort from San Jose, California death metalers Mortuous, with their album Upon Desolation. So yeah, this is the sophomore album from this band, and came across them thanks once again to Thralls of Metal, and upon doing research found out this is Mike Beam, formerly from Exhumed. This is his band along with one of the guys from Necrod, so I was expecting to hear some pretty gnarly stuff. And it is very gnarly. This album, like, musically, it fits right along the lines of bands like Incantation, because you get that, like, cavernous, evil sound. But you also get quite a bit of a Doom influence. I wouldn't call this a Death Doom album. I'd say this is still straight up death metal, but the Doom moments that you do get on this album definitely remind me of like old Autopsy, Temple of Void, maybe even a little bit of Spectral Voice at times. So yeah, this album is just packed full of murk and filth, grossness. There's even a little bit of groove going on at times, and that groove kind of reminds me of Bolt Thrower, but when it gets very fast and like gross sounding, definitely harkens back to early Exhumed. After all, you have Mike Beams in there, so you might get a little hint of that sound here and there on this album. Great riffs, solid drum work, solid production. Overall, this was another great one. I give this a 9 out of 10. So far for the death metal side, we've been hitting some home runs this week, so yeah, definitely check out Upon Desolation by Mortuous. If you are a fan of Incantation, Exhumed, Autopsy, check this out. And for the fifth and final album I'm talking about for this week's Under the Radar is another debut band. This is the debut album from Italian death metal band Morbus Grave, and this album's called Lurking into Absurdity. So, of course, I wanted to check this one out because this is a debut from a new band out of Italy that play death metal. And this album, best way to describe this album is, what would happen if you had Death Leprosy recorded in the style of early Autopsy, and the vocalist is more of a black metal vocalist? That's basically the best way to describe this album, because a lot of the riffs and the drum work is very much inspired by Death's Leprosy album, but there are riffs and moments that do feel like early Autopsy, particularly Severed Survival era Autopsy. Even in the production, it feels very much like Severed Survival Autopsy. Like, the guitars are buzzsaw sounding, the snare is very punky sounding, but the vocals definitely remind me more of bands like Absu or even Mayhem a little bit. It's more of that raspier black metal approach, which is very interesting to hear because, you know, with this being a death metal band, you're not used to hearing black metal vocals in a death metal band. But here, they definitely take that approach, and I think they do it very well. Only complaint I have is I do wish the snare would have been a little bit punchier, and the vocals could have been up in the mix just a little bit, because sometimes with the bass and the guitars and the drums, the vocals do get a little bit buried at times. But overall, this is a really good debut. I give this an 8.5 out of 10. I look forward to hearing what this band has down the pike in the future and maybe get the production fixes just right. And I think they might... I'd say this band could have the potential to break out in the underground scene of European death metal. And that does it for this week's Under the Radar. What was your favorite album of the ones that I talked about? Leave them in the comments section below, as well as links in the description for the albums in question for you guys to check out. But until next time, horns high. See you guys soon.
At the ballpark. Someone's gonna put lasagna.
I took a tomato.
Okay, yeah, it's Levi. It's Levi.
Damn it.
I'm done. Could I?
I want to know what he got for this one.
Alright, Seth, let's go Tomato Town.
Seth is dying.
I would like a single slice of your greatest tomatoes
I
in
would
the
like
park.
your finest tomato, please.
Calm
down, Seth.
Who hasn't voted? Somebody vote.
No, it's
Levi.
five is the
Levi's the one that has some
Levi is
votes.
the majority.
Yeah.
Oh
my
my.
lord.
Seth, breathe.
Oh,
Tomato. I would be really interested to see these prompts.
Yeah, like
Officer,
literally
please
that
escort me out the
fucking-
ballpark. I just wanted to eat my tomato.